I get asked a lot in my live streams for my thoughts on Mike Mentzer. Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here. Thought I would chat with you guys and gals a little bit about this today, but a quick reminder, if you guys will please click like down below, be greatly appreciated. If you are not following or subscribed, please do so. And if you will be kind enough to drop me a comment down below, I would greatly appreciate that. Thank you so much. All right, a lot of diehard Mentzer fans are going to hear what I'm going to say here. They're going to get extremely angry at me, okay? Let me be clear, I actually appreciate Dorian Yates. I appreciate a lot of what Dorian Yates did bring and discuss in terms of training. Also, I am one of the guys who says, look, yeah, you really can gain on 5 or 6 sets a week. If they're trained hard enough, I think it's totally doable for people to make really good gains on that. Even if it's not always optimal, it's still going to be pretty dang good. If it's done correctly, hard enough, good exercises picked, proper execution, so on. Now, that being said, the problem with Mentzer, a few things people have to think about. Whenever they mention Mentzer's training, nobody discusses Mentzer's training. They only discuss his philosophies in the final years before his death that he wrote about. And we need to be clear, they are absolutely 100% not the same thing. The way Mentzer trained was almost just like a traditional power building approach when he took second place in Mr. Olympia. His training looked nothing like the philosophies he promoted later. No one who used the philosophies he promoted later was vastly successful in bodybuilding at a competitive level. Like to where you're like, oh yeah, they placed 3rd in the Olympia, 5th. It didn't happen. So there should be part of your problem, the dead giveaway. He didn't train that way, right? Did he use lower volumes than his contemporaries? Yes. Did he push progressive overload and some basic principles really hard? Yes. Okay, so we do need to be clear on that part. Mentzer appeared to train pretty dang hard in his heyday. But he used approaches, moderate rep ranges. He didn't use a lot of really high reps. He was big on stuff like, about the 6 to 10. He used moderate volumes. He didn't use really low volume. He used moderate volumes. And he pushed hard progressive overload, okay? Now, in light of that, you look at that, and when you understand those facts, any reasonable person who understands training would go, well, that makes sense that he did well. Right? Because that's a perfectly valid way to train. So you train in that manner, which can absolutely produce phenomenal results in bodybuilding with really good genetics for it, like he had, plenty of pharmaceuticals, which he had, particularly in an era where there weren't that many competitors by comparison. Well, of course he did really well. It's a sound training method. But when people discuss Mentzer's training, none of them do that. They're not like, yeah, dude, we do 10 sets of muscle group a week, 8 sets of muscle group a week, and the 6 to 10 rep range and push hard progressive overload to failure, Okay? That's more of what he did. Now, he did say, I think he admitted he had only trained 3 days a week, which is, again, different. He trained dramatically different than the guys, other people on the platform there. Problem that you got to remember, too, he lost to Arnold. Arnold trained insane, excessive amounts of volume going into the show. But you also have to go, Arnold didn't do that in the off season, by the way. That was Arnold's contest prep. Arnold's contest prep. He was doing that often in place of cardio. We know weightlifting burns body fat. The studies now show weightlifting is just as good as cardio. And so Arnold had plenty of pharmaceutical help, right, to recover from it. So yeah, he could do 40, 50 sets a week per muscle group, but a lot of it was really high reps, just volume, doing 4 hours a day, 6 days a week. He was also cutting up for shows, okay? He was at that point just using it to burn calories, quite frankly. Whereas in guys like Mentzer, like, look, we just go walk and do list cardio to burn calories and do the minimum training we need to stimulate growth. They both work. It did work. Right, the issue, Mentzer's approach wasn't bad back then. It was, you look at it, and it was very reasonable, very reasonable. The way that he was training when he was winning, again, as a coach, even today for me, even for power lifters, I do some bodybuilders. I look at that and go, yeah, I see no reason why it wouldn't be successful. Of course it should work. Yeah, that's perfectly good, right? It's good stuff. So, but when he got older and he retired, he fell apart. And this was kind of known and documented. People forget this stuff. It was talked about. He suffered from a lot of mental illness, a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety. He completely quit working out. We need to be clear. When Mentzer was writing all this stuff, he didn't train like any of this stuff. He never trained like that. All this one set. And then where he started getting, we could do one set, or 3 exercises for one set every week. So now we're down to 3. Then it started getting smaller and smaller. And as long as we go to absolute failure, we don't ever need a second set. What people need to understand, he did not train that way. By the time he came to these philosophies, he was struggling with his own mental health. He was struggling with depression, anxiety, other stuff. He quit training completely. He had actually said at one time, I just ride a stationary bike. That was his exercise. He wasn't lifting anymore. It's probably made his mental health deteriorate. And it was always said, and people are going to get mad, it was always said he used a lot of amphetamines and possibly meth to self-medicate to help with his issues. So essentially what you were dealing with at this point was someone who was actually a very intelligent man. No one's looking at Mentzer and saying this guy wasn't smart. He was clearly intelligent. And he had good training philosophies early, and that gave him a voice because he had placed second in the Olympia, and then he started writing, and he was well-spoken and well-written because he was, an intelligent guy. It was received and published. And it was new and in conflict with the current stuff, so it created a counterculture. The problem is it was all crazy, and it was someone who was suffering from their own mental illness. He admitted all his stuff was based on the philosophies of Ayn Rand, applying exercise science, which didn't really exist so much then, off of a philosopher's books. We're not in a good mental state for this. There was no evidence to support his theories. It was speculation and hypothesis he proposed that were untested. And we now know most of that stuff has been tested and debunked. So he was essentially pushing stuff by that point that doesn't work. Like we know going beyond failure doesn't, right? Going beyond failure doesn't create extra muscle growth. It just doesn't. The rep you hit failure on doesn't even cause muscle growth. We need multiple sets. But again, he was someone who had kind of gone crazy. And then people say, but he trained Dorian Yates. He didn't train Dorian Yates. Dorian Yates met up with him one time, and he kind of trained him in one session. And then he used Dorian's name after that. And Dorian said later, no, he didn't really train me. And I let him use my name because I felt sorry for him. Okay? And people have blown that out of proportion to fuel this myth. And it's a problem, guys. The methods he started promoting later in life do not work.